Chat, we're reacting to the worst things the CIA has ever done. Let's do it.
The Guatemalan coup. In June 1954, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of Jacobo Arbenz Guzman, the democratically elected president of Guatemala. The operation, codenamed PB Success, began when President Eisenhower authorized it after aggressive lobbying by United Fruit Company, which owned vast plantations in Guatemala. Arbenz had won the presidency in 1951 and launched a land reform program that redistributed unused land to poor farmers. The reform primarily affected United Fruit, which owned more than 550,000 acres, but cultivated only a small fraction. The company held enormous political influence in Washington. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles and his brother CIA Director Allen Dulles had previously worked as lawyers for United Fruit. They portrayed Arbenz as a communist threat despite his Democratic election. The CIA coordinated the operation from bases in Florida and used staging and training sites in Honduras and Nicaragua. Officers created a small rebel army led by Castillo Armas. The agency provided weapons, training, and air support. The CIA launched a massive propaganda campaign using a radio station called the Voice of Liberation that broadcast false reports of Armas leading a large military force marching toward the capital. In reality, Armas commanded fewer than 500 soldiers who advanced only a few miles into Guatemala before stopping. The psychological warfare proved decisive. On June 18, 1954, aircraft flown by CIA pilots bombed Guatemala City. The raids caused minimal damage but created widespread panic. President Arbenz, believing he faced a massive invasion, refused requests to distribute weapons to civilian volunteers. On June 27th, facing pressure from military officers influenced by CIA propaganda and bribes, Arbenz resigned and fled to Mexico. The coup created the conditions that led Guatemala into a civil war beginning in 1960, which lasted 36 years and killed more than 200,000 people. Operation Chaos.
Jesus.
From 1967 to 1970.
Why? And this, see, it's all because of money. Money and power. It seemed like he was doing a good thing, giving land to poor farmers who need it to make money, to live, to survive. This, like, I don't know, the U.S. has made some shitty decisions.
74. The CIA ran a massive domestic surveillance operation called Operation Chaos that spied on thousands of American citizens engaged in legal political activities. The program began after President Lyndon Johnson asked CIA Director Richard Helms to investigate whether foreign governments were controlling the anti-war movement. Johnson suspected communist countries were behind protests against the Vietnam War. The CIA created a special unit within the counterintelligence staff to conduct the investigation. What started as a limited inquiry quickly expanded into widespread spying that violated the CIA's own charter, which explicitly prohibited domestic intelligence operations against American citizens. CIA officers infiltrated anti-war groups, student organizations, and civil rights movements. They opened and photographed mail, tapped phones, and broke into homes to plant surveillance devices. The agency created files on over 7,200 American citizens and developed a computerized index of 300,000 names. Agents attended protests and political meetings, photographed participants, and compiled detailed reports on their activities. The CIA targeted prominent journalists, members of Congress, and civil rights leaders, including Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Many of those under surveillance were college students who had signed petitions or attended rallies, exercising their constitutional rights. The agency shared information with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, local police departments, and the Internal Revenue Service, which in some cases used the intelligence in tax-related investigations. Operation Chaos continued under President Richard Nixon, who expanded it to spy on his political opponents. The program remained secret until December 1974, when journalist Seymour Hersh published a front-page article in the New York Times exposing the illegal domestic spying. The revelations led to the Church Committee investigation in 1975, which concluded that Operation Chaos constituted a massive violation of civil liberties. Operation Chaos...
So does anything happen? It's like that level of government. It's like you're getting no consequences anymore. It's kind of like the whole Epstein shit. I don't get it.
Showed us how easily personal privacy can be compromised, even in places where you'd least expect it. Most of our personal data is collected, analyzed, and sold by third parties every single day. That's why I want to introduce today's video.
And there's like no massive reform or anything like that. Like I don't. It's just like, oh, we're sorry. We won't do it again. This is what actually happened. Sorry. Um, we're gonna do it how we're supposed to, even though you don't know how we're supposed to do it. Like I don't. It's just all gross.
Guarantee. Prime Minister of Iran. The operation overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran. The operation, codenamed TP Ajax, fundamentally altered Middle Eastern politics. In 1951, Mossadegh had nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which had controlled Iran's petroleum industry since 1913. Britain received the majority of profits, while Iran received only a small fraction. When Parliament voted to take control of the oil industry, Britain responded with sanctions and appealed to the United States for help. President Eisenhower and Secretary of State John Foster Dulles agreed, fearing Mossadegh might align with the Soviet Union. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, arrived in Tehran to direct the operation. The CIA assembled a coalition of military officers, newspaper editors, religious leaders, and street criminals. The agency paid protesters to stage demonstrations that created the appearance of chaos. On August 16th, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi attempted to dismiss Mossadegh, but was forced to flee to Rome after loyalist troops resisted. Roosevelt continued organizing. On August 19th, CIA-funded crowds took to the streets. Some protesters pretended to be communist supporters of Mossadegh and attacked religious institutions to turn the population against him. Others called for the Prime Minister's removal. Paid agents infiltrated the military and police, convincing key officers to join the uprising. By afternoon, tanks surrounded Mossadegh's residence. After 9 hours of fighting that killed approximately 300 people, Mossadegh surrendered. The Shah returned and appointed General Fazlollah Zahedi as prime minister. Mossadegh was tried for treason and sentenced to 3 years in prison, after which he lived under house arrest until his death in 1967. When the Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah in 1979, rage at American interference fueled the seizure of the U.S. Embassy. The MK Ultra. Between 1953 and 1973, the CIA conducted a classified research program called MK Ultra that tested the effects of drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and electroshock on human subjects without their knowledge or consent. The program began under CIA Director Allen Dulles, after he grew concerned about reports that American prisoners of war in Korea had been brainwashed. He authorized chemist Sidney Gottlieb to run experiments exploring whether the human mind could be controlled. The CIA recruited doctors and researchers at universities and hospitals through front organizations that disguised the agency's involvement. These researchers administered lysergic acid diethylamide, commonly known as LSD, to patients in mental hospitals, prisoners, and drug addicts without telling them what they were receiving. Some subjects were given the drug repeatedly for weeks or months. In other experiments, researchers used electroshock therapy at intensities far beyond standard medical practice, sometimes combined with drug-induced comas lasting for days. On November 19, 1953, biochemist Frank Olson attended a retreat at Deep Creek Lodge in Maryland with other CIA scientists. During dinner, Sidney Gottlieb secretly added LSD to bottles of Cointreau that were served after the meal. Olson and several others unknowingly consumed the drug. Over the following days, Olson became increasingly paranoid and depressed. On November 24th, his supervisor took him to New York to see a psychiatrist. 3 days later, Olson fell to his death from the 10th floor window of the Statler Hotel. The CIA initially told his family he took his own life unrelated to their work. The program remained secret until 1975, when the Church Committee investigation exposed it. President Gerald Ford formally apologized to Olson's family. Most MK Ultra records were destroyed in 1973 on orders from CIA Director Richard Helms. Phoenix Program, Vietnam. During the Vietnam War, particularly between 1968 and 1972, the CIA directed a program called Phoenix that aimed to destroy the Viet Cong infrastructure through capture, interrogation, and assassination. CIA officer William Colby designed Phoenix to target Viet Cong political organizers, tax collectors, supply officers, and other civilians who supported the insurgency in South Vietnam. The agency created provincial interrogation centers throughout the country where suspects were held and questioned. American advisors trained South Vietnamese units in interrogation techniques that included electric shock, water torture, and severe beatings. Many detainees had been identified through unreliable intelligence or paid informants seeking reward money. The program offered cash bounties for captured Viet Cong members, which encouraged false accusations. South Vietnamese forces conducting operations often killed suspects rather than capturing them, because commanders received credit for eliminations regardless of whether targets were taken alive. Between 1968 and 1972, Phoenix was responsible for the deaths of at least 20,000 people, though
Jeez.
some estimates place the number as high as 40,000. The South Vietnamese government's own statistics reported that over 26,000 suspects were killed during this period. American officials acknowledged that many victims were not actually members of the Viet Cong infrastructure, but were farmers or civilians who had been misidentified or deliberately targeted for personal reasons. In 1971, William Colby testified before Congress that Phoenix had eliminated 20,587 members of the Viet Cong infrastructure. Critics argued that Phoenix constituted a war crime and violated the Geneva Convention's protections for civilians. Despite the killings, the Viet Cong infrastructure survived throughout the war. The program remains controversial as an example of counterinsurgency methods. Black
I'm
Sites
confused.
rendition. After the September 11th, 2001
What
terrorist attacks, the CIA established a network of secret prisons in countries around the world where terrorism suspects could be interrogated without legal protections or oversight. The program, known as Extraordinary Rendition, involved kidnapping suspects and transporting them to covert facilities.
That's some
called
crazy
black sites.
shit right there.
President George W. Bush authorized the CIA.
Which honestly, I believe it, and that's the places where the CIA and FBI is gonna fuck you up until you tell them what they want to know. Where they will kill you if you're just gonna sit there and bullshit.
To capture and detain members of Al Qaeda
in
using
GTA.
methods that would not be permitted under American law.
Yeah.
The agency opened secret prisons in Thailand, Poland, Romania, Lithuania, and Morocco. CIA officers captured suspects in various countries with assistance from local intelligence services. In some cases, agents grabbed individuals off streets without warrants or formal charges. The prisoners were taken to black sites, where interrogators used techniques that the CIA called enhanced interrogation, but that critics described as torture. Detainees were subjected to waterboarding, which simulates drowning. Some
I believe
prisoners
it.
were waterboarded dozens of times.
I mean, would you, if you needed to stop 9/11 from happening, or like a second thing like that, like this is the shit that you kind of got to do, because they're not going to tell you if you're going to be nice to them. They're not going to tell you just put them behind bars for the rest of their life, because they're going to die in GTA.
Interrogators also employed sleep deprivation, keeping detainees awake for up to 180 hours, sometimes while shackled in standing positions. Other techniques included confining prisoners in small boxes and subjecting them to extreme temperatures. At least 119 individuals passed through the black site program between 2002 and 2006. Many were held for months or years without access to lawyers and without being charged with crimes. The CIA kept the program secret from most members of Congress. Several prisoners died in custody. In November 2002, a detainee named Gul Rahman froze to death in a secret prison in Afghanistan after interrogators stripped him and left him chained to a concrete floor in freezing temperatures.
Well, what'd he do?
In 2014, the Senate Intelligence Committee concluded that enhanced interrogation techniques were more brutal than the CIA represented, and that the interrogations did not produce unique, actionable intelligence that could not have been obtained through lawful methods. Operation Northwoods. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented President Kennedy with a plan to stage terrorist attacks against American targets and blame Cuba as justification for military invasion. The proposal, called Operation Northwoods, remains one of the most disturbing declassified documents in American history. Joint Chiefs of Staff presented President Kennedy with a plan to stage terrorist attacks against American targets and blame Cuba as justification for military invasion. The proposal, called Operation Northwoods, remains one of the most disturbing declassified documents in American history. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, military leaders sought another opportunity.
I don't even think I know about that. What's the Bay of Pigs invasion?
After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, military leaders sought another opportunity to overthrow Fidel Castro. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Lyman Lemnitzer and other senior officers developed an elaborate scheme of false flag operations designed to create public support for war with Cuba. The plan proposed sinking American ships in Guantanamo Bay and blaming Cuban forces. It suggested staging funeral ceremonies for mock victims to generate emotional impact. Another element involved creating a fake Cuban Air Force aircraft that would attack a civilian jetliner. The plan specified that the CIA would paint a drone aircraft in Cuban military colors and file a flight plan for a commercial airliner carrying college students. The agency would simultaneously launch both the legitimate plane and the disguised drone. The drone would transmit distress signals claiming to be under attack before being destroyed. The real plane would land safely at a military base, while the military reported that Cuba had shot down the student flight. The Joint Chiefs also proposed conducting terror attacks in American cities. The document suggested that agents could bomb buildings in Miami or Washington and blame Cuban operatives. The military recommended hijacking aircraft.
That's
and either
crazy,
forcing them to
though.
land in
Like, I'm twitching, but like the fact of just instilling fear into like an entire country of people just so you can go get rid of somebody, or like I don't know, it literally is so messed up. Which I'm not too like caught up on what Cuba was doing or why we wanted to go invade them, but to instill all that fear, that's kind of crazy.
Cuba or destroying them. The detailed memorandum, dated March 13, 1962, listed numerous scenarios. The proposals were presented to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, but they were never approved or implemented by the Kennedy administration. He rejected the plan and made clear that such operations would never receive authorization. The Operation Northwoods documents remained classified until 1997. Lumumba assassination. In August 1960, less than 2 months after Congo gained independence, the CIA began planning to assassinate Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, the country's first democratically elected leader. CIA Director Alan Dulles sent a cable stating that removing Lumumba was an urgent and prime objective. Lumumba had won the May 1960 parliamentary elections and became prime minister on June 30th when Congo gained independence. His Pan-African nationalism and requests for Soviet assistance alarmed American officials who feared he would align Congo with the communist bloc. The Eisenhower administration authorized covert actions aimed at removing Lumumba from power. The CIA station chief
Why don't we try to talk to him first? Like, if anything had to do with the Soviet Union, we were like, oh, die. We don't even want to talk about it. Like, we don't even want to figure out why you believe that. We don't want to try to convert you over here. We just want to get rid of you. That's insane to me. Why?
Headquarters that Lumumba should be eliminated. In September 1960, CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb traveled to Congo, carrying poisonous biological materials concealed in a diplomatic pouch. Scheider brought substances intended to cause a disease that would appear natural and kill Lumumba without raising suspicion. The station chief was ordered to place the toxins in Lumumba's food or toothpaste. However, events moved faster than the CIA could act. On September 14th, Colonel Joseph Mobutu, who had been cultivated by the CIA and Belgian intelligence, staged a military coup with American and Belgian support. Mobutu arrested Lumumba and held him under house arrest, while debate continued in Washington about whether to kill him. On December 1st, Lumumba escaped and attempted to reach supporters, but was arrested by Mobutu's soldiers on December 2nd. For 7 weeks, Lumumba remained imprisoned, while the CIA and Belgian intelligence discussed his fate with Mobutu. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba was flown to Katanga province and handed over to separatist forces. That same night, Belgian police officers and Katangan soldiers executed Lumumba and 2 colleagues. Although Lumumba was ultimately killed by Belgian and Congolese forces, rather than directly by the CIA, declassified documents confirmed that American officials actively planned his assassination and supported those who carried it out. If you'd like to see more stories like this... I
want to know why, but... Okay. Holy crap. Jesus. These... golly. Oh my god. These freaking... What do you call it? Thumbnails are awful. But, chat... I think that might be it for tonight.